The other day, I was thinking about quarterbacks drafted past the second round in very recent memory that have become stars at the next level, and immediately one guy popped in my head, and that guy is Dak Prescott. The next thing I went to look at was his NFL.com scouting report to see why he was the 4th round pick and how that 4th round pick became the best quarterback in his draft class, and immediately looking at the strengths and weaknesses on that scouting report, one quarterback came to mind, and that is Kellen Mond. Now, aside from the major similarities in Kellen Mond and Dak Prescott's college career, Kellen Mond was a 4-year starter at Texas A&M, while Dak Prescott was a 3-year starter at Mississippi State, both in the SEC, and they were both pretty good college quarterbacks when they were there. But the main thing that really stood out to me was how similar these two quarterbacks were as prospects coming out of the draft. Reading Let's Zierlein's scouting report on these two quarterbacks, he gave Dak Prescott a 5.9 grade while giving Kellen Mond a 6.12 grade, which are both very, very similar. Along with that, these two have almost identical body types. They have almost the same height, almost the same weight, almost the same arm length, and almost the same hand size. But the thing that struck me the most was Lance Zierlein's overview on Dak Prescott. And I quote, "Hard to find an NFL comp for Prescott because he's built like Donovan McNabb but lacks McNabb's ability and polish. Prescott has NFL size, mobility, and enough arm, but the tape shows a player who must improve his mechanics, poise, and quickness through his progressions if he is to become a full-time starter in the NFL. There are absolutely draftable traits and upside, but he will need extended work to smooth out his flaws. Until then, a team will be wise to utilize him on short yardage packages," end quote. Now reading his overview on Kellen Mond, and I quote, "Quarterback with dual threat physical tools who has grown and matured into a role as a confident game manager. The Aggies offense asked too much of Mond in the past, which led to diminishing returns. However, the 2020 offense featured a strong rushing attack paired with play action where he not only found greater confidence and rhythm as a passer, but also noticeable pocket poise and accuracy. He doesn't often get antsy working from the pocket and throws with solid ball placement underneath. Issues with touch and anticipation cause erratic completion numbers when asked to throw downfield and outside the numbers, which will concern evaluators. His zone read talent and quick release to incorporate RPOs adds to his draft value, but he might lack the consistency to ever become more than a solid backup." These two scouting reports sound incredibly similar to me. Specifically, their two major flaws coming out. Both of them were based on mechanics. Mond, obviously, if you watch him, he throws kind of wobbly. And Dak Prescott's overview, his main weakness was mechanics as well. So that's the reason that these quarterbacks were not seen as high draft prospects. I was actually pretty high on Mond coming out. He was my quarterback 5. I had an early second round grade on him, slightly higher than the grade I had on Mac Jones. And the main reason that I was so much higher on Mond than most was with a good quarterback coach, mechanics is not a very hard issue to work out in the NFL. And obviously, Dak Prescott is a great example of this. He came into the league with mechanics being his main weakness, but he won Offensive Rookie of the Year and was the most pro-ready out of any quarterback in that draft class. And I felt the same way about Mond coming out of the draft. I thought he was one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks in this draft. He also has better pocket poise than Prescott did coming out, has a stronger arm, and is faster. He ran a 4.57, I believe, while Prescott runs a 4.79. So from that standpoint, Mond is basically just a better Dak Prescott coming out. Some other weaknesses that Zierlein charted with Mond were that his deep throws were often flat and overthrown, he was highly inconsistent in working with anticipation, he didn't consistently make defenses pay for coverage mistakes, shied away from big play opportunities to take shorter throws, meaning he was a little bit more conservative, he missed late safety movement indicating incoming blitzes, so he was bad at reading blitzes, and those couple issues in his mechanics were the main issues that he had. Otherwise, there were really no weaknesses with Mond coming out. And this is why when Mond was drafted, I called him the steal of the draft, because a guy like this, obviously talent-wise, should be at the very least a second-round pick. I mean, you don't let a guy like this fall to the 3rd round. And because of all this, I never really understood the appeal of taking a guy in Mac Jones who has a high floor, but a relatively low ceiling over a guy like Kellen Mond who has a slightly lower ceiling than Mac Jones does, but I feel like he has insanely high potential and way more potential than Jones did. Now, obviously, I've gone over the similarities between Kellen Mond and Dak Prescott and shown how good of a prospect Kellen Mond actually was, but what am I really getting at here? Well, I think once Kellen Mond gets the chance to start, he will be at the very least a top 15 quarterback in the league. Now, I know he didn't have the best chance to develop this year. Obviously, Mike Zimmer seemed like he didn't like him for some reason, not choosing to play him in the Packers game where Kirk Cousins wasn't there. Their playoff spot was on the line. They started Sean Mannion, who isn't good at all. And maybe Mike Zimmer knows what's best. Maybe he doesn't want to hinder the development of Kellen Mond, and he doesn't want to put the pressure on him of starting an NFL game yet, and he just wants him to focus and become a better player for the future. But I still probably would have started Mond in that game based on what I've shown before, that I think he's very pro ready. And another thing that I very lightly skimmed by earlier was that Mond was a 4-year starter in the SEC, which is something that is not only very hard to do, but means that he's even more pro-ready because guys like Trey Lance, Mac Jones, they only started 1 year, Zach Wilson only had 1 year of really elite play, and while Mond may not have been nearly as good as he was his senior year and his other years, he still showed a lot of progression from his freshman to his senior year, and that shows me that he's going to get better in the NFL. And as I said before, it seems like he didn't work on his mechanics a lot while he was in college, but with a good offensive coordinator, a good quarterbacks coach, like I said before, that's a pretty easy thing to fix in the league, give it a year or two. So all I'm saying is don't be surprised if Kirk Cousins gets COVID next year, as he often does. Kellen Mond gets thrust into the starting role and performs better than Kirk Cousins does. And don't be surprised if Mond is a guy we look back on and call him one of the greatest quarterback steals of the 21st century.